I stood at the marble reception desk of the Azul Paraíso resort, watching as my sister Vanessa's face transformed from bridal confidence to complete shock. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake," she stammered to the concierge, her French manicured nails tapping nervously on the counter. "The wedding package was confirmed months ago." The concierge glanced at her computer screen, then back at Vanessa with practiced sympathy. "I understand, Ms. Caldwell, but according to our system, the resort ownership has recently changed, and the new owner has specific instructions regarding your reservation." That's when Vanessa spotted me across the lobby, casually sipping a mojito. Her eyes widened with the slow dawning realization that her carefully orchestrated wedding, the one she had accidentally forgotten to invite me to, was now firmly in my hands. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The tropical breeze drifted through the open-air lobby of the Azul Paraíso resort, carrying the scent of plumeria and saltwater. Under sight. Different circumstances, I might have closed my eyes and savored the moment, my first real vacation in 3 years. Instead, I watched my sister's wedding dreams begin to unravel, and I couldn't pretend I wasn't enjoying it. "Olivia?" Vanessa's voice cut through the ambient sounds of steel drums and distant waves. "What are you doing here?" I took another sip of my mojito, letting the mint and rum linger on my tongue before answering. "Isn't it obvious? I'm welcoming the wedding party to my resort." Behind Vanessa, her fiancé James looked confused, while her best friend Meredith, who had been my friend first, until Vanessa claimed her like everything else, had the decency to look uncomfortable. The rest of the wedding party was scattered throughout the lobby, collecting welcome bags and tropical cocktails, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding at the front desk. "Your resort?" James asked, stepping forward. "What is she talking about, Nessa?" I smiled at James. Poor, clueless James. 6 years of dating Vanessa, and he still hadn't realized what she was capable of. "Oh, did Vanessa not tell you? It must have slipped her mind. Just like my invitation." Vanessa's face flushed red beneath her carefully applied foundation. "This is ridiculous. We've had this booked for 11 months. You can't just—" "Actually, I can." I placed my empty glass on a nearby table and approached the desk, standing beside my sister, but addressing the concierge. "Sophia, could you please show Ms. Caldwell and her fiancé the ownership documents? I believe that might clear things up." Sophia, who had been briefed exhaustively on the situation, nodded and produced a leather portfolio. As Ms. Olivia Caldwell mentioned, she completed the purchase of Azul Paraíso Resort 3 weeks ago. All reservation contracts are subject to review by the new management. Vanessa snatched the portfolio, flipping through pages with increasing agitation. Her eyes darted across legal language and official stamps until she reached my signature on the final page. When she looked up, the color had drained from her face. "This is insane," she whispered. "You bought an entire resort just to ruin my wedding?" "Ruin?" I arched an eyebrow. "I never said anything about ruining your wedding. The ceremony can proceed exactly as planned. I'm simply ensuring I'll be there to see it." James looked between us, confusion giving way to realization. "Wait, Vanessa. You told me your sister couldn't come because she was in Singapore for work, that she sent her regrets?" A small crowd had begun to gather now. Vanessa's future in-laws, elegant in their resort wear, hovered nearby. Her college friends, who had once been our shared friends before she systematically turned them against me, whispered behind perfectly manicured hands. Vanessa gripped the edge of the reception desk, her knuckles turning white. "This is my wedding week, Olivia. My wedding. After everything, after all these years, you choose now to make some kind of point?" The irony of her indignation might have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. 29 years as sisters, and she still thought she was the only one entitled to feelings. Make a point? I kept my voice level, though my heart was hammered in my chest. I found out about your wedding from Instagram, Vanessa. Not even your personal account. From your wedding planner's sneak peek of your destination. Can't wait to coordinate this dream Cayman Islands wedding for Vanessa Caldwell. 6 months of planning, and you couldn't send a text? James turned to Vanessa, his expression hardening. You told me you called her, that she was too busy with her new position to take time off. It's complicated, Vanessa managed, her eyes darting around at the growing audience. It always is with you, I replied. To Sophia, I added, please ensure Ms. Caldwell and her guests receive their room keys. The welcome dinner will proceed, as scheduled at 7. I turned to leave, but Vanessa grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You can't do this, she hissed, low enough that only I could hear. You can't just insert yourself into my perfect week. Not after what happened, with Dad's company. And there it was, the real reason behind my missing invitation. Not that I needed confirmation, but it was satisfying to hear her admit it, however obliquely. Your perfect week? I leaned closer, matching her whisper. You mean the week you specifically planned to exclude me from? The week you lied to your own fiancé about? That perfect week? She released my arm, her expression shifting from anger to calculation. Classic Vanessa. Always looking for the angle, the advantage. Fine, she said, smoothing her designer sundress. You've made your point. You're invited. Congratulations on your purchase. Her smile was brittle as glass. I hope it was worth the money just to spite me. I stepped back, surveying my sister with newfound clarity. Growing up, I had always been in awe of Vanessa. Her confidence, her easy charm, the way she could make any room revolve around her. It had taken me 32 years to see that confidence for what it often was. Entitlement. This isn't about spite, Vanessa. It's about the fact that you deliberately excluded me from one of the most important events of your life, then lied about it to everyone, including your future husband. I looked at James, whose face reflected the uncomfortable realization that he was marrying someone who might not be exactly who he thought she was. The honeymoon suite has been upgraded, I told him, a peace offering of sorts. My wedding gift to you both. As I walked away, I heard Vanessa's carefully controlled voice resume its bridal sweetness, no doubt beginning damage control. James, honey, this is just Olivia being Olivia. You know how dramatic she can be. I made my way through the resort's lush gardens toward the private villa I'd reserved for myself. The owner's villa, technically, though that still felt surreal. Throughout my life, Vanessa had taken so much from me. Attention, opportunities, even people I cared about. This time, I had taken something first. What Vanessa didn't know, what no one knew, was that buying the resort wasn't just about ensuring my invitation to her wedding. It was about so much more. Years in the making. The wedding was just the beginning. By the end of the week, Vanessa would understand exactly what it felt like to have something precious taken away. After all, she hadn't just forgotten to invite me to her wedding. She had stolen something irreplaceable from me, and I was finally ready to set things right. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The owner's villa sat on a secluded stretch of beach, separated from the rest of the resort by a grove of palm trees and flowering hibiscus. As I stepped onto the private terrace overlooking the Caribbean Sea, I finally allowed myself a moment to breathe. To process what I had just done, I bought a resort, an entire luxury resort in the Cayman Islands. If my former colleagues at Preston Financial could see me now, they'd think I'd lost my mind. Olivia Caldwell, once the most rational investment manager on their team, making a multi-million-dollar purchase out of what? Spite? Revenge? Justice? Maybe all three. I kicked off my sandals and sank into a cushioned lounger, letting the sound of waves wash over me. On the horizon, the setting sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was the kind of view people saved their entire lives to experience. Now it was mine, at least temporarily. The resort purchase had depleted a significant portion of my savings and maxed out my available credit, but I had run the numbers. With proper management and the right strategic partnerships, I could turn a profit within 18 months. It wasn't just an emotional decision. It was a calculated investment. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant back in New York. How did it go? Nuclear meltdown or Cold War? I smiled, despite myself. Rebecca had been the only person I'd trusted with my plan, partly because I needed her help expediting the paperwork, and partly because I needed someone to tell me if I was making a catastrophic mistake. She had done neither, simply nodding and saying, "About time you stood up for yourself." "Somewhere in between," I texted back. V is in damage control mode. Wedding still proceeding as planned. 3 dots appeared, then, "And the other thing? Any sign of it yet?" My stomach tightened. "Not yet. Starting the search tomorrow." I set my phone aside and closed my eyes, letting memories wash over me like the waves on the shore below. Growing up as Vanessa Caldwell's younger sister had been an exercise in invisibility. Vanessa had always been the supernova in our family constellation, brilliant, magnetic, impossible to ignore. She had inherited our mother's stunning looks and our father's razor-sharp business instincts, a combination that made her the undisputed favorite in our household. I, on the other hand, had been the quiet one, the steady one, the one who excelled in school while Vanessa excelled in life. By the time I reached high school, I had accepted my role in the Caldwell family hierarchy. I was the reliable daughter, the one who would hold things together while Vanessa shone. Our father, Richard Caldwell, had built Caldwell Industries from a small manufacturing business into a respected name in renewable energy technology. From childhood, it had been assumed that Vanessa would eventually take over. She had the charisma, the networking skills, the ability to charm investors and partners. I had the analytical mind, the attention to detail, the ability to spot financial patterns and opportunities. Perfect complements, our father would say. Vanessa the face, Olivia the foundation, except Vanessa had never seen it that way. To her, my skills weren't complementary, they were threatening. Every achievement, every recognition I received became something she needed to diminish or overshadow. When I was accepted to Princeton, she suddenly announced her engagement to her college boyfriend, ensuring that my achievement was eclipsed by her wedding plans. When I received my first major promotion at Preston Financial, she revealed she was pregnant with her first child, a pregnancy that mysteriously ended in a convenient miscarriage 2 months later, once the attention had sufficiently shifted from my career milestone. But the real breaking point had come 3 years ago, when our father suffered a massive stroke. I had flown home immediately from a business trip in London, arriving at the hospital to find Vanessa already installed in the family consultation room, speaking with doctors as if she were the only child. When our father's condition stabilized, she positioned herself as his primary caregiver, limiting my access and filtering all medical information through her. "Dad needs calm and stability right now," she would say. "He gets agitated when, too. Many people are giving input on his care." What she meant was, he gets agitated when anyone but me gives input. For 6 months, I watched from the periphery as she made decisions about our father's treatment, his rehabilitation, his finances. I tried to be supportive, to work within the boundaries she established, telling myself that her controlling behavior was a response to fear and grief. Then came the day I arrived at his house to find a notary leaving. Vanessa explained that Dad had been updating his will, standard procedure after a major health event. Something in her expression made me suspicious. It took weeks of careful investigation, but I eventually discovered that Vanessa had manipulated our father, still foggy from medication and stroke-related confusion, into signing over controlling interest in Caldwell Industries to her alone. The company that should have been our shared inheritance, the legacy our father had built for both his daughters, was now firmly in Vanessa's control. When I confronted her, she didn't even bother to deny it. "Be reasonable, Liv," she had said, using the childhood nickname I had always hated. "We both know I'm better suited to run the company. You're too cautious, too hesitant. Dad needs to know his life's work is in decisive hands. So you manipulated him while he was medically vulnerable? Had he signed documents he couldn't possibly understand?" She had shrugged, that elegant, dismissive gesture she had perfected since childhood. "I simplified a transition that would have happened anyway. Dad agrees it's for the best." "Does he? Or have you convinced him that's what he believes?" Her eyes had hardened then, all pretense of sisterly collaboration vanishing. "This is how it's going to be, Olivia. You can accept a position at the company. Something in risk assessment would suit your particular talents. Or you can contest the new arrangement and destroy what's left of Dad's peace of mind. Your choice." I had walked away that day, not just from the argument, but from Vanessa, from Caldwell Industries, from the family dynamics I had tolerated for 30 years. I returned to my position at Preston Financial, channeling my anger and hurt into my work, building my own success separate from the Caldwell name. For almost 3 years, Vanessa and I had maintained a careful distance, interacting only at major family holidays and keeping conversations superficial. Our father's condition had gradually improved, though he would never fully recover. He now lived in a luxury care facility near Vanessa's home in Connecticut, where she controlled every aspect of his care and every person who visited him. Vanessa had taken the company, our father's trust, and even access to him. But there was one thing she had taken that she didn't know I knew about. Something irreplaceable. Something I had tracked to this very resort. The sudden chime of my phone pulled me from my thoughts. A notification from the resort's security system showed Vanessa and James having an intense conversation by the pool bar. I had installed cameras throughout the property immediately after finalizing the purchase. Not to spy, I told myself, but to ensure everything ran smoothly during this critical week. Even from a distance, I could see that Vanessa was in full damage control mode, her hands moving expressively as she spoke, occasionally touching James's arm for emphasis. Classic Vanessa manipulation techniques. Explain away the inconsistencies, reframe the narrative, position herself as the reasonable one dealing with unreasonable circumstances. I wondered what story she was spinning. That I was jealous of her happiness? That I had always been competitive and this was just another attempt to steal her spotlight? Or perhaps the truth was too uncomfortable, that she had deliberately excluded me from one of the most significant events of her life, and rather than accept that exclusion, I had found a way to make it impossible. My phone chimed again with a message from the resort manager. "Welcome dinner preparations complete. Chef requests confirmation on the menu changes." Reality snapped back into focus. I wasn't just here to confront Vanessa or to search for what she had taken. I was now responsible for an entire resort, with staff and guests who deserved the experience they had paid for. "Menu approved," I replied. "Please ensure the welcome gift is placed in the honeymoon suite as discussed." The gift, an antique compass in a hand-carved wooden box, had been carefully selected, not as a peace offering, but as the first clue that I knew exactly what Vanessa had taken and why she had really chosen this specific resort for her destination wedding. By morning, the real game would begin. And unlike all the games we had played throughout our childhood, this was one Vanessa wouldn't win. The welcome dinner was set for 7 p.m. in the resort's oceanfront pavilion. I arrived at 6:45, wanting to check the final arrangements before the wedding party descended. The staff had transformed the space beautifully. White linen tablecloths billowing gently in the evening breeze, hurricane lanterns with flickering candles creating a warm glow, and centerpieces of local orchids and tropical greenery adding vibrant color. "Everything looks perfect, Maria," I told the events coordinator, who beamed with pride. "The menu adjustments?" "All taken care of, Ms. Caldwell," she assured me. "We've added the local seafood appetizers you requested and adjusted the dessert. Selection to include your sister's favorite key lime pie." I nodded, satisfied. This was part of my strategy, showing Vanessa that despite everything, I still remembered the small details about her, still cared, even if she had decided I wasn't, worth including in her big day. And the seating chart? Maria handed me a tablet displaying the table arrangements. I had made only one change to Vanessa's original plan, adding myself to the head table, directly across from her. Not beside her, not as her supportive sister, but facing her, a constant reminder of what she had tried to erase. Guests began to arrive, dressed in resort casual elegance, flowy dresses and linen shirts in tropical hues. I greeted them warmly, playing the dual role of resort owner and unexpected sister of the bride with practiced ease. Many were surprised to see me, their confusion evident as they tried to reconcile my presence with whatever narrative Vanessa had spun about my absence. "Olivia, I had no idea you would be here," exclaimed Vanessa's college roommate, Kim, air-kissing both my cheeks. "Last-minute change of plans," I replied smoothly. "I couldn't miss my only sister's wedding, could I, Vanessa?" "Told us you were stuck in Singapore on some huge investment deal," said Kim's husband, frowning slightly. "Did she?" I raised an eyebrow. "How fascinating, considering I've never worked in Singapore." I moved on before they could process this discrepancy, greeting other guests with the same warm efficiency. By the time Vanessa and James arrived, subtle undercurrent of confused whispers had spread through the gathering. Vanessa entered like she always did, as if invisible spotlights suddenly converged on her. She wore a white silk jumpsuit that highlighted her tall, slim figure, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo adorned with a single tropical flower. James followed a half-step behind, handsome in navy linen, his expression still carrying traces of the earlier confrontation. Our eyes met across the pavilion. For a moment, I thought she might make a scene, demand I leave, create the kind of dramatic confrontation she had always excelled at when feeling threatened. Instead, she plastered on her society smile and glided toward me, pulling James along. "Olivia," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "How wonderful that you could rearrange your busy schedule to join us after all." "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," I replied, matching her false warmth, "especially once I realized how much this specific resort meant to you." Something flickered in her eyes, a momentary crack in her composure. She knew what I was implying. She recovered quickly, but not before I caught the brief flash of panic. "It's a beautiful property," she said carefully. "We were drawn to its history and character." "Its history in particular, I imagine," I replied, maintaining eye contact. James, oblivious to the subtext, smiled and extended his hand to me. "I'm really glad you're here, Olivia. Families should be together for moments like this." The genuine warmth in his voice made me feel a twinge of guilt. James was collateral damage in this sisterly warfare, a decent man caught between two women with decades of complicated history. "Thank you, James. I agree completely." I turned to address them both. "I've asked the chef to prepare some special dishes tonight, including your favorite key lime pie, Vanessa. I remember how much you loved it when we vacationed in Key West, as teenagers." Before she could respond, the resort's manager announced that dinner was ready to be served. As everyone moved toward their assigned tables, Vanessa gripped my arm, holding me back momentarily. "What are you really doing here, Olivia?" she hissed, her smile never faltering for the benefit of watching guests. "I told you, attending my sister's wedding and buying an entire resort was the only way to get an invitation? Please, what's your actual endgame?" I extricated my arm from her grasp. You chose this specific resort for a reason, Vanessa. The same reason I bought it. We both know what's hidden here. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about. The compass in your suite says otherwise. I smiled. Serenely. Enjoying your wedding gift? I walked away before she could respond, taking my place at the head table. Throughout dinner, I played the gracious host, engaging warmly with James's parents, chatting with the best man about snorkeling spots around the island, and sharing resort history with interested guests. Vanessa, meanwhile, grew increasingly distracted. She picked at her food, laughed too loudly at mediocre jokes, and kept glancing toward the exit, as if calculating an escape route. When the key lime pie was served, she barely touched it, despite it truly being her lifelong favorite, dessert. After the main courses were cleared, the resort manager signaled me that it was time for the traditional welcome toast. I rose, champagne flute in hand, feeling all eyes turned toward me. This was the moment I had been planning since discovering Vanessa's wedding location, the beginning of the real confrontation. For those who don't know me, I began, I'm Olivia Caldwell, Vanessa's sister, and, as of 3 weeks ago, the proud owner of Azul Paraíso Resort. A murmur rippled through the gathering. I continued smoothly. Many of you might be surprised to see me here tonight, as my invitation was apparently lost in the digital mail. A few uncomfortable chuckles. But when I learned where Vanessa had chosen for her destination wedding, I knew I had to be present, regardless of the means required to ensure that presence. I turned slightly to address Vanessa directly, though my words were still for the entire group. You see, this resort has a special significance to our family, specifically to our father. Vanessa set down her champagne glass with enough force that the stem nearly snapped. Her eyes locked on mine, a silent warning I chose to ignore. Many of you know that our father, Richard Caldwell, suffered a severe stroke 3 years ago. What you may not know is that before his illness, he was an avid sailor and adventurer. His greatest dream was to sail around the world after retirement. He had even commissioned a custom yacht, which he planned to christen the Olivessa, a combination of both his daughters' names. I paused, letting the significance sink in. Most of these guests knew our father, knew his passion for sailing, but few knew the full story of what had happened after his stroke. What you definitely don't know is that our father had a secret tradition. On every significant voyage, he would collect a small vial of water from a meaningful location. He kept these vials in a custom-made case, a sailing log of sorts, along with coordinates, dates, and personal reflections on what each place meant to him. Vanessa stood abruptly. I think we've had enough family history for one evening, she said, her voice tight. This is supposed to be a celebration, not a memoir reading. I ignored her, continuing calmly. That collection was our father's most prized possession, more valuable to him than his company or any material asset. After his stroke, when he could no longer sail, he would spend hours looking through that case, reliving his adventures. I looked directly at Vanessa now, abandoning all pretense of addressing the wider group, until it disappeared from his room at the care facility. The same week you took control of Caldwell Industries. The pavilion went silent. James looked between Vanessa and me, confusion evident on his face. What is she talking about, Vanessa? He asked quietly. She's being dramatic, Vanessa replied dismissively. Dad's memory isn't what it used to be. He simply misplaced that old case. Is that why you chose this resort? I pressed. Because it was the site of Dad's last collection point before his stroke? The place where he planned to begin his round-the-world journey? I raised my glass. A toast, then, to find things, and to secrets revealed. As I took a sip of champagne, Vanessa's facade finally cracked. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the pavilion, leaving James and the assembled guests in shocked silence. The betrayal had been named. The real game had begun. After Vanessa's dramatic exit, the welcome dinner dissolved into awkward clusters of conversation. James, after a moment of indecision, followed his fiancée out of the pavilion. The remaining guests pretended to resume their festivities, but the undercurrent of gossip was palpable, exactly as I had anticipated. I circulated among the tables, playing the role of gracious host, deflecting questions about the family drama with practiced ease. Wedding jitters, I explained with a dismissive wave. You know how emotional these events can be. But the seed had been planted. The whispers had begun. Why had Vanessa forgotten to invite her only sister? What was the significance of this particular resort? And most intriguing to the gathered gossips, what exactly had Vanessa taken from our father? By the time I returned to my villa, it was just past 10. I kicked off my heels and poured myself a generous scotch, savoring the burn as I stepped onto the terrace. The night was perfect. Clear skies scattered with stars, warm breeze carrying the scent of tropical flowers, waves breaking gently on the shore below. I should have felt triumphant. Phase 1 of my plan had been executed flawlessly. I had secured my place at the wedding, exposed the first thread of Vanessa's deception, and created the necessary social pressure to keep her from simply canceling the event. Instead, I felt hollow. Seeing the hurt and confusion on James's face had been harder than I'd expected. He didn't deserve to have his wedding week overshadowed by decades of sisterly animosity. But then, I reminded myself, neither did I deserve to be deliberately excluded from a significant family event. My phone vibrated with an incoming call. James. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but guilt won out. Hello, James. Can we talk? His voice was strained but controlled. In person. 20 minutes later, I found him waiting at the small beach bar near the main pool, nursing what appeared to be a whiskey neat. The bartender had closed up for the night, but I'd instructed the staff to accommodate the wedding party's requests at any hour. Where's Vanessa? I asked, sliding onto the stool beside him. Taking a sleeping pill in our suite. He didn't look at me, instead staring at his glass as if it contained answers rather than alcohol. She refused to talk about what happened at dinner. Said you were manipulating everyone with half-truths and exaggerations. And what do you think? He turned to me then, his eyes reflecting the soft light strung around the bar. I think there's a lot more to this story than either of you is telling me. I think I'm marrying into a family with complicated dynamics that I've only seen the surface of. And I think I deserve to know what I'm walking into. I signaled the hovering staff member, who quickly brought me sparkling water with lime. You're right, I said finally. You do deserve that. So tell me. No games. No strategic revelations for maximum dramatic effect. Just the truth. His directness was refreshing. In the Caldwell family, straightforward communication had never been our strong suit. We preferred subtext, implication, and carefully crafted power plays. The truth is complicated, I began, choosing my words carefully. Vanessa and I have always had a competitive relationship. Growing up, she was the star. The favorite, the one with natural charisma and beauty. I was the serious one, the planner, the one who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. That's pretty standard sibling stuff, James pointed out. It doesn't explain buying a resort to crash her wedding. No, it doesn't, I agreed. What does explain it is what happened after our father's stroke. Vanessa systematically excluded me from his care, limited my access to him, and manipulated him during his recovery to sign over controlling interest in our family company, a company that should have been our shared inheritance. James frowned, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Vanessa told me your father always intended for her to run the company, that you had chosen a different path in finance. I did choose a different initial career path, but Dad always envisioned us working together eventually. Me handling the financial strategy, Vanessa managing the client relationships and public face. It was only after his stroke, when his cognitive function was compromised, that suddenly the plan changed to exclude me entirely. "And this collection you mentioned at dinner?" I took a breath, preparing to discuss the most painful part. Our father was an avid sailor, had been his whole life. After our mother died, it became more than a hobby. It was his connection to her. They had spent their honeymoon sailing the Caribbean. James nodded. Vanessa mentioned his love for sailing, said that's partly why she chose a beachfront wedding. Did she tell you about his collection? The water samples from every meaningful place he'd ever sailed? No, James admitted. It was his most precious possession, more meaningful than any material asset. He kept it in a custom-made wooden case, 37 small vials, each with coordinates, dates, and a personal note about the significance of that location. Some were obvious: the cove where he proposed to our mother, the bay where he scattered her ashes. Others were more personal, places where he'd had epiphanies, made important decisions, experienced profound moments. I stared out at the dark ocean, feeling the familiar ache whenever I thought about Dad's collection. After his stroke, when he could no longer sail, he would spend hours with that case. It was his link to his memories, his former self. Sometimes, on his more confused days, it was the only thing that could center him, bring him clarity. "And Vanessa took it?" James asked quietly. "It disappeared from his room the same week she had him sign over the company. When I asked about it, she said he must have misplaced it, that his memory was unreliable. But Dad would never misplace that collection. Never. So you think she has it here? At the resort?" I turned back to him. "I know she does. This resort is significant. It's where Dad collected his last sample before his stroke. He had chartered a boat from this very harbor for a week-long sail, just 3 days before the stroke that changed everything. He'd told me it was one of his best trips ever, perfect conditions, spectacular sunsets." James was quiet for a long moment, processing. "If what you're saying is true, why would she bring the collection here? Why risk you finding out?" "Because she never expected me to be here," I said simply. "And because this place meant something to Dad. I think some part of her, some part that still has a conscience, wanted to honor that connection. Or maybe she just thought it was poetic, having her wedding at the place that represented Dad's last moment of true freedom." James drained his glass and set it down with finality. "So what now? You've bought the resort, secured your invitation, made your accusation. What's your end game?" "Olivia? I want the collection back," I said firmly. "Not just for me, but for Dad. It belongs with him, or at the very least it should be shared between both his daughters, not hidden away by one." "And then? You'll leave the wedding? Sell the resort?" I hesitated. I hadn't thought that far ahead, honestly. My focus had been so singular. Find the collection, confront Vanessa, reclaim what had been taken. I don't know, I admitted. I guess that depends on what happens next. On whether Vanessa can finally acknowledge what she's done and make amends. James stood, straightening his linen shirt. "For what it's worth, I believe you. About the collection. At least. Vanessa can be selective about what she shares. Even with me." A shadow crossed his face. "But she's still the woman I love, the woman I'm going to marry in 4 days. So I'm asking you, as your future brother-in-law, please don't turn our wedding into a battleground." The sincerity in his voice made me uncomfortable. This was the collateral damage I hadn't fully considered. Not just James's feelings, but the genuine relationship he thought he had with Vanessa. A relationship built, at least partially, on Vanessa's carefully curated version of herself. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding, James," I said softly. "I came to find something precious. That was stolen. That's still my priority." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "I'll talk to Vanessa. See if there's a way to resolve this that doesn't involve more public drama." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. For listening, for not dismissing me outright. That's what family does, he replied, the irony apparently lost on him. Good night, Olivia. I watched him walk away toward the honeymoon suite, his shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying a new weight. Part of me felt guilty for burdening him with family drama, days before his wedding. But another part, the part that had spent years being sidelined by Vanessa, felt vindicated that someone else finally saw a glimpse of who she really was. Back in my villa, I opened my laptop and pulled up the resort's surveillance system. Not to spy on James and Vanessa, but to check something specific: the marina storage facility where guests could secure valuables too large for room safes. Earlier that day, I'd observed Vanessa speaking with the marina manager, gesturing emphatically about something. Sure enough, the time-stamped footage showed her entering the storage area with a medium-sized leather duffel bag after checking in, then leaving without it. Whatever was in that bag, she had deemed it too valuable to keep in her suite, especially once she realized I was here. I made a note to visit the marina first thing in the morning. If my suspicions were correct, I was one step closer to finding Dad's collection, and if Vanessa had indeed hidden it there, her panic at the welcome dinner made perfect sense. For the first time since arriving, I felt a genuine sense of optimism. This wasn't just about crashing a wedding anymore. It was about reclaiming something irreplaceable, something that connected both of us to our father in a way that transcended business assets or inheritance. Tomorrow would be a day of strategic retreat, at least on the surface. I would play the apologetic sister, giving Vanessa space to believe she had regained control of her perfect wedding week. Meanwhile, I would be systematically searching every possible hiding place in that marina. The game had advanced to the next phase. I woke before sunrise, the sky outside my villa still painted in shades of deep blue and violet. Sleep had come, fitfully, my mind churning with plans for the day ahead. I dressed quickly in linen shorts and a casual blouse, resort attire that wouldn't draw attention, and headed toward the marina. The resort was quiet at this hour. A few early morning joggers nodded as they passed, and the breakfast staff was just beginning to set up on the main terrace. No sign of the wedding party yet. They would likely be sleeping in after last night's welcome dinner drama. Perfect. Eyes. Marina was a small but well-appointed facility on the eastern edge of the property. A dozen or so slips housed everything from jet skis to luxury yachts, and a tidy building at the entrance contained the harbor master's office and secure storage facilities. According to the resort documentation I'd reviewed during the purchase, the storage area included climate-controlled lockers and a small vault for guests' valuables. The marina was a small but well-appointed facility on the eastern edge of the property. A dozen or so slips housed everything from jet skis to luxury yachts, and a tidy building at the entrance contained the harbor master's office and secure storage facilities. According to the resort documentation I'd reviewed during the purchase, the storage area included climate-controlled lockers and a small vault for guests' valuables. Miguel, the harbor master, was already at his post, updating the day's log. He looked up in surprise as I entered. "Miss Caldwell, good morning. We weren't expecting you so early." "I'm an early riser," I smiled, projecting relaxed authority. "And please call me Olivia. I'd like to check the secure storage facilities. As the new owner, I should familiarize myself with all aspects of the resort." Miguel hesitated. "Of course, although normally we require advance notice for anyone to access the secure areas, event management." I maintained my pleasant expression. "I understand the protocol, Miguel, but as the owner, I need to ensure everything is properly maintained. I promise I won't disturb any guest belongings." He nodded, evidently deciding that keeping his new boss happy outweighed procedural adherence. "Let me get the master keys." The storage facility was smaller than I'd imagined, a room about the size of a large walk-in closet, with 24 numbered lockers along the walls and a small vault at the back. Each locker had a digital keypad for guest-selected codes. With master key override capability, how many lockers are currently in use? I asked casually. Miguel consulted his tablet. "Just 3, Miss..." Olivia. Number 8 for the Henderson family. They're storing diving equipment. Number 17 for Mr. Rossi, who has some expensive camera gear. And number 12 for Ms. Vanessa Caldwell, your sister. Bingo. And the vault? Empty at the moment. Most guests prefer the convenience of the lockers. I nodded, scanning the room as if conducting a routine inspection. Everything looks well maintained. I'd like to check the security camera system as well. Miguel led me to a small monitoring station in his office. We have full coverage of the entrance and the main storage area, but individual lockers aren't monitored internally for privacy reasons. Very sensible, I agreed. And these recordings are stored for how long? 30 days, automatically archived to our cloud server. Excellent. I'd appreciate access to that system as well. After Miguel had set me up with the necessary login credentials, I thanked him and headed toward the beachfront restaurant for breakfast, my mind racing with new information. Vanessa had indeed secured something in locker number 12. The question now was how to access it without setting off alarms, both literal and figurative. I needed a diversion. And more importantly, I needed Vanessa's code. As I sipped my coffee on the restaurant terrace, watching the sun rise fully over the ocean, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Any progress on the search? Located target, I replied. Working. On an extraction plan. Need backup? Came her immediate response. I considered it. Rebecca had offered to fly down if needed, claiming she could use a Caribbean vacation. But adding another person to this delicate situation might complicate things unnecessarily. Not yet. We'll update if that changes. I was contemplating my next move when a shadow fell across my table. Looking up, I found Vanessa standing there, immaculately dressed in a white sundress, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes. Despite the early hour, her makeup was flawless, her hair perfectly styled. Classic Vanessa, never letting anyone see a crack in the facade. May I join you? Her voice was cool but controlled. Of course. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. Sleep well? She ignored the question, settling gracefully into the seat. A server immediately appeared, greeting her by name and taking her order for green tea and fruit. Apparently, she had already established herself as a VIP with the staff. Wedding or no wedding. James told me about your conversation last night, she said once the server had left. About Dad's collection. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Did he? He thinks I should give it back to you, or at least show it to you. Her expression was unreadable behind the large sunglasses. He doesn't understand what's at stake. And what is at stake, Vanessa? Besides your perfect image. Her mouth tightened. You always were sanctimonious, even as a child. So quick to judge, so certain of your moral superiority. This isn't about moral superiority. It's about what's right. Dad's collection doesn't belong to you alone. It's part of his legacy. Our legacy. Our legacy? She let out a short, humorless laugh. That's rich, coming from the daughter who abandoned the family business to play investment banker in New York. I didn't abandon anything. You manipulated Dad while he was vulnerable and took what should have been shared between us. Vanessa removed her sunglasses, fixing me with an intense stare. Her eyes, so like our father's, were hard and calculating. Do you know why I chose this resort, Olivia? Do you really think it was some sentimental journey to honor Dad's sailing memories? The question caught me off guard. Why then? Because it was for sale. She smiled thinly. Yes, I knew that before you did. I was planning to buy it as a surprise for James. He's always wanted to own a hospitality business, and this place has excellent finances. I had the down payment ready, the financing secured. It was going to be my wedding gift to him. I stared at her, processing this new information. But you never completed the purchase. Because someone outbid me at the last minute. Someone who somehow knew exactly when to swoop in with a cash offer. Her eyes narrowed. I wonder who could have had access to my confidential financial transactions. Perhaps someone with connections in the banking industry? The implication was clear. Vanessa thought I had discovered her purchase plans through some nefarious means and deliberately sabotaged them. The truth was far more coincidental. I had tracked Dad's collection here through his sailing logs, discovered the resort was for sale, and made the purchase to ensure my invitation to the wedding. The fact that Vanessa had been planning to buy it herself was pure chance, but I wasn't about to correct her misunderstanding, not when it gave me potential leverage. So this is really about the resort for you? Not Dad's collection? She waved her hand dismissively. The collection is just water samples. Sentimental, yes, but hardly worth the drama you're creating. If they're just water samples, why did you take them from Dad? Why hide them in a marina locker? A flash of surprise crossed her face before she could mask it. You've been snooping. I've been investigating, I corrected. There's a difference. Vanessa leaned forward, dropping her voice. Let me be clear, Olivia. I'm getting married in 3 days. Nothing is going to interfere with that. Not your accusations, not your resort. Purchase? Nothing. After the wedding, we can discuss Dad's collection. But until then, I expect you to behave like a supportive sister, at least in public. And if I don't, then I'll make sure Dad knows exactly who caused a scene at his daughter's wedding, who upset him unnecessarily during his recovery, who put her own selfish needs above family harmony. She smiled sweetly as the server returned with her tea. Think about what that would do to him in his condition. It was a masterful threat, perfectly calibrated to my deepest vulnerabilities. Vanessa knew that despite everything, I would never willingly cause Dad additional pain or stress. You're manipulating me with Dad's health, just like you manipulated him with the company. She shrugged elegantly. I'm being practical, something you've never understood. She stood, gathering her purse. Today is the island excursion for the wedding party. You're welcome to join, of course. As the resort owner, I'm sure you can arrange a transportation. As she walked away, I remained at the table, turning over this new information in my mind. The fact that Vanessa had wanted to buy the resort added an unexpected layer to our conflict, and her confirmation that Dad's collection was indeed in the marina storage gave me a clear target. But her threat was real. Any public confrontation could potentially get back to Dad, causing him distress during his already difficult recovery. I needed to be more subtle in my approach, to recover the collection without creating a scene that would harm our father. I signaled for the check, my mind shifting to a new plan. If Vanessa was taking the wedding party on an island excursion, today, the marina would be relatively quiet. And if I could somehow get her locker code, my phone buzzed with a resort notification. Vanessa had just scheduled an outbound boat for the wedding party at 11 a.m., returning at sunset. That gave me a 6-hour window to search for Dad's collection, without interference, without confrontation, without drama that might get back to him. But first, I needed that code. Finding Vanessa's locker code required a delicate balance of resourcefulness and discretion. Direct confrontation was out of the question, and using my ownership authority to override the lock would leave an electronic trail I couldn't afford if I wanted to maintain plausible deniability. I needed to be clever about this, The morning progressed. The wedding party gathered near the main pool for pre-excursion cocktails. I observed from a distance, mentally cataloging everyone present. James was there, along with his parents and brother. Vanessa was holding court near the bar, surrounded by her bridesmaids. Various friends and extended family milled about, already in vacation mode despite the early hour. I noticed Meredith, Vanessa's maid of honor and my former friend, checking her phone repeatedly, looking slightly anxious. According to the wedding itinerary I'd reviewed, she was responsible for coordinating today's activities. Perfect. I pulled out my phone and texted Sophia, the concierge. Please inform Ms. Vanessa Caldwell, that there's an issue with her marina locker that requires immediate attention. Staff attempted to call but couldn't reach her. It was a calculated risk. If Vanessa came herself, my plan would fail. But knowing my sister and her delegation habits, especially on her wedding week, sure enough, within minutes, I watched as Sophia approached Vanessa, who frowned, said something to Meredith, then returned to her conversation. Meredith immediately headed toward the lobby, her expression concerned. I circled around through the garden path, timing my casual encounter with Meredith in the main corridor. Meredith, everything okay? You look worried. She startled slightly, then composed herself. Our friendship had ended years ago when she firmly aligned herself with Vanessa, but we'd always maintained polite civility. Oh, Olivia! Yes, just some wedding logistics. Nothing major. Anything I can help with? As the resort owner, I might be able to expedite things. She hesitated, clearly weighing the benefits of my assistance against her loyalty to Vanessa. Practicality. Won out. Actually, there's apparently an issue with Vanessa's storage locker at the marina. Something about the humidity controls malfunctioning. She asked me to check on it. I feigned concerned surprise. That's not good. Climate control is crucial for preserving delicate items. Let me come with you. I can make sure it gets immediate attention. Relief washed over her face. Would you? That would be so helpful. Vanessa was very clear that the contents are irreplaceable. I can imagine, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. We walked to the marina together, making superficial small talk about the island and the wedding plans. Meredith carefully avoided mentioning last night's dinner drama or my unexpected presence at the wedding. I didn't press. Miguel looked up in surprise when we entered the harbor master's office together. I spoke before he could say anything that might reveal my earlier visit. Miguel, this is Meredith, Vanessa's maid of honor. There seems to be an issue with locker number 12's climate control. His confusion was evident, but to his credit, he played along. Ah, yes. Let me check the system. While he pretended to examine the controls, I positioned myself with a clear view of the keypad as Meredith opened the locker. 6 digits, 110987. I committed it to memory without being obvious about watching. Everything looks fine, Meredith said, peering into the locker. The bag seems undisturbed. The system says the humidity spiked briefly this morning, but it's back to normal parameters now, Miguel improvised smoothly. Perhaps just a sensor glitch. Well, that's a relief, Meredith said. Vanessa would have been devastated if anything happened to her father's collection. She froze, realizing what she'd revealed, then glanced at me nervously. I mean, it's okay, Meredith, I said gently. I know about Dad's collection. That's partly why I'm here. She bit her lip, clearly uncomfortable. Vanessa said you two had different perspectives about it. That's one way to put it, I agreed. Another would be that she took something precious from our father without his consent, something that should have remained with him or been shared between both his daughters. Meredith secured the locker, avoiding my gaze. I shouldn't get involved in family matters. Yet here you are. Quite literally involved, I pointed out. Guarding stolen property for my sister. It's not that simple, she protested. Vanessa said your father wanted her to keep it safe. And you believed her, despite knowing how she operates? A flash of something, recognition perhaps, or guilt, crossed Meredith's face. She had been my friend first, before Vanessa had systematically pulled her into her orbit. She knew both sides of my sister. Look, I'm just trying to do my job as maid of honor. The boat leaves in 20 minutes and I need to finish organizing everyone. She headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I was surprised you weren't invited to the wedding. I asked Vanessa about it, and she said it was complicated. It always is with Vanessa, I replied. After Meredith left, I thanked Miguel for his quick thinking and returned to my villa. I now had the code, but I couldn't risk accessing the locker until the wedding party was safely away from the resort. I also needed to ensure there would be no cameras recording my retrieval of the collection. I spent the next hour reviewing contracts and answering emails, performing the actual duties of a resort owner. It was strange how quickly I'd adapted to this new role, perhaps because it gave me a sense of control that had been lacking in my relationship with Vanessa for so long. At precisely 11:15, I received confirmation that the wedding party's boat had departed for the day's excursion. It was time. But as I prepared to leave my villa, I found myself hesitating, caught in an unexpected moment of doubt. What was I really doing here? Was this elaborate scheme, buying a resort, crashing a wedding, planning to take back Dad's collection, truly about justice? Or was I simply responding to Vanessa's manipulations with manipulations of my own? I sank onto the edge of my bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of our shared history. Despite everything, Vanessa was still my sister. We had shared a childhood, parents, countless memories, both good and bad. There had been times, brief moments scattered throughout our lives, when the competition had fallen away, and we'd connected as sisters should. I remembered a night when I was 16 and Vanessa was 18. She'd found me crying in our shared bathroom after being rejected by my first serious boyfriend. Instead of gloating or using my vulnerability against me, she'd sat on the tile floor beside me, produced a hidden pint of ice cream, and shared painful stories of her own heartbreaks. For a few hours, we weren't rivals. We were just sisters, united against the world of disappointing teenage boys. Or the day of our mother's funeral, when Vanessa had reached for my hand during the service, holding on so tightly it almost hurt. We hadn't spoken, couldn't speak through our grief, but that physical connection had been a lifeline for both of us. What had happened to those moments of genuine connection? When had our relationship become solely defined by competition and resentment? I knew the answer, of course. Our father had always encouraged rivalry between us, believing it would push both of us to excel. Healthy competition, he called it, seemingly oblivious to the damage it caused. And as we grew older, those patterns had only deepened, turning natural sibling rivalry into something more destructive. But did that justify what I was doing now? Was I any better than Vanessa if I resorted to her methods? My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Boat departed, coast clear, proceed with extraction? The message jolted me back to the present. Whatever philosophical quandaries I was wrestling with, the fact remained that Vanessa had taken something precious from our father, something that didn't belong solely to her, and regardless of our complicated history, that wrong needed to be righted. Proceeding now, I texted back. I gathered my resolve, along with the small bag I'd prepared with gloves and a cloth to wrap the collection case. This wasn't just about my conflict with Vanessa anymore. It was about restoring something meaningful to my father, something that connected him to his memories, his past self, his identity before the stroke had taken so much from him. As I walked toward the marina, I thought about what success would look like. If I recovered the collection, what then? Would I return it directly to Dad? Share it with Vanessa? Keep it for myself out of spite? The answer came with surprising clarity. I would return it to its rightful place in Dad's room at the care facility, not as a victory over Vanessa, not as a power move in our endless game of one-upmanship, but simply because it was what he deserved. What would bring him comfort and joy during his recovery? And perhaps, I realized, that was the fundamental difference between Vanessa and me. For her, possessions, whether material assets or family heirlooms, were tools for control and status. For me, they were connections to the people and moments that mattered. I reached the marina with newfound determination. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about doing the right thing, regardless of how Vanessa would react or what it would mean for our relationship going forward. Some things were worth fighting for, even if the fight itself was messy and imperfect. Dad's collection was one of those things, and I was finally ready to reclaim it. The marina was quiet when I arrived, with most guests out enjoying water activities or the wedding party excursion. Miguel was nowhere to be seen, likely out assisting, with a jet ski rental, according to the schedule on his desk. Perfect timing. I had come prepared. In my bag was a pair of thin cotton gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, a small digital camera to document the condition of the collection before taking it, and a soft microfiber cloth to wrap the case for protection. I had also brought my laptop, planning to temporarily disable the security camera feed using my owner access credentials. But first, I needed to check if anyone else was around. I did a causal loop of the marina facilities, noting with satisfaction that the place was deserted except for a maintenance worker cleaning one of the boats at the far end of the dock. He nodded respectfully as I passed, clearly recognizing me as the owner. Back in Miguel's office, I sat down at his computer and logged into the security system. With a few keystrokes, I scheduled a system update that would pause recording for 30 minutes. It would look like routine maintenance in the logs, nothing suspicious about a new owner assessing and updating resort systems. With the cameras temporarily disabled, I made my way to the storage room, locking the door behind me. The room felt smaller than it had earlier, the air heavy with the responsibility of what I was about to do. I approached locker number 12, my heart beating faster as I punched in the code, 110987. A soft click, and the door swung open. Inside was a leather duffel bag, expensive but well-worn, with Vanessa's initials embossed on a discreet tag. I carefully removed it and placed it on the small table in the center of the room, then slipped on my cotton gloves before unzipping it. The contents took my breath away. Nestled in layers of protective cloth was exactly what I'd been seeking, our father's collection case. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, a wooden box about the size of a large hardcover book, with a hinged lid and custom-fitted compartments inside. The polished mahogany gleamed even in the storage room's dim lighting, and Dad's initials were inlaid in brass on the lid, RJC, Richard James Caldwell. With reverent hands, I lifted the case from the bag and set it on the table. Before opening it, I took several photos documenting its condition and placement in the bag. Evidence, if needed, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. Then, holding my breath, I opened the lid. 37 small glass vials nestled in velvet-lined compartments, each one containing a sample of water, each one labeled with precise coordinates, a date, and a brief description. Some contained clear water, others slightly tinted with minerals or algae. Together, they represented a life well sailed, a map of my father's most meaningful moments on the water. I gently touched one of the vials, reading its label. 28 Degreean, 80 degree Auv, 51289, where I asked her to marry me. My mother had told me the story many times. Dad chartering a small sailboat off the Florida coast, dropping anchor in a secluded cove at sunset, proposing with a ring tied to a piece of sailing rope. It had been completely unplanned. The right moment presenting itself in the perfect location. Another vial caught my eye, its water slightly cloudy. 18 Degran, 65 Degraubo, 923-16. Last sail with Helena. My mother's name. The trip they had taken just weeks before her cancer diagnosis. The last time they had sailed together. Tears blurred my vision as I continued examining the collection. So many memories. So many significant moments, all preserved, in these humble vials of water. And Vanessa had taken them from Dad, keeping them from providing the comfort and connection he so desperately needed during his recovery. As I prepared to close the case, I noticed something tucked into the lid's inner lining, a folded piece of paper that hadn't been visible at first glance. Carefully, I extracted it, unfolding what appeared to be a handwritten note in my father's distinctive script. For my daughters, Vanessa and Olivia, it began. These waters have carried me through life's greatest journeys, both literal and figurative. Each sample represents a moment when I felt truly alive, truly connected to something larger than myself. I hope that when I'm gone, these waters will connect you to me, and more importantly, to each other. Remember that you are both from the same ocean, even when you flow in different directions. All my love, Dad. I stared at the note, reading it again and again. Dad had intended the collection for both of us. It wasn't meant to be hidden away by one daughter, but shared between two sisters as a connection to our father and to each other. Beneath the first note was a second piece of paper. Newer, the creases less worn. This one was also in Dad's handwriting, but shakier, clearly written after his stroke. It was dated just a week before the collection disappeared from his room. "Vanessa," it read, "I know you think you're protecting me by keeping the company solely under your control, but dividing our family divides my heart. Olivia deserves her place too, both in the business and in our family. Please reconsider and remember the waters that connect us all." I sat back, stunned. Dad had known what Vanessa was doing. He hadn't been as confused or manipulated as I had feared. He had seen clearly enough to recognize the injustice and ask her to rectify it, a request she had not only ignored, but countered by taking something precious from him. This changed everything. Not just my understanding of what had happened with the company, but my approach to resolving the current situation. I carefully replaced both notes in the case, closed it, and wrapped it in the microfiber cloth I had brought. Then I returned Vanessa's duffel bag to the locker, arranged exactly as I had found it, minus the collection case. After securing the locker and wiping away any fingerprints, I reactivated the security cameras, then left the marina with Dad's collection safely in my bag. No one had seen me enter or exit. The only evidence of my visit would be the security logs showing my scheduled system update, a perfectly normal activity for a new owner. Back in my villa, I placed the collection on my desk and considered my next steps. Now that I had recovered Dad's treasure, I needed to decide how to proceed with Vanessa. The easy path would be confrontation, showing her the collection at the wedding reception, exposing her theft to everyone present. But that approach wouldn't honor the intention behind Dad's notes. He wanted his daughters connected, not further divided. I needed a more nuanced strategy, one that would achieve justice while leaving the door open for reconciliation. And I needed to implement it before the wedding party returned from their excursion. I opened my laptop and began drafting 2 documents. The first was a formal letter to the Caldwell Industries Board of Directors, outlining my evidence of Vanessa's manipulation of our father after his stroke, including the note in his own handwriting expressing his desire for shared leadership. I would send this only if necessary, as a last resort. The second document was for Vanessa, a proposed agreement that would restore balance to our family's company and legacy. Shared leadership of Caldwell Industries, with Vanessa as CEO and me as CFO. Equal ownership, transparent decision-making, and most importantly, a commitment to work together on Dad's care, ensuring his remaining years were peaceful and fulfilling. It was a peace offering, but with teeth. The implicit threat was clear: accept these reasonable terms, or face exposure and potential legal challenges. After finalizing both documents, I checked the time. The wedding party wouldn't return for another 3 hours, which gave me just enough time for the final piece of my preparation. I called the resort's concierge service. "Sophia, I'd like to arrange a private dinner for tonight. Just 2 people, myself and my sister. Can we use the small clifftop gazebo? I'm thinking about sunset, around 7. Very simple, very elegant. And I'll need absolute privacy. No staff lingering, just drop-off service." "Of course, Ms. Caldwell. The clifftop gazebo is perfect for intimate conversations. Will you be wanting champagne?" I thought about it. "Yes, and 2 place settings, seafood for the main course, and..." I smiled slightly. Key lime pie for dessert. After ending the call, I opened the collection case once more, examining each vial, reading each label, connecting with the moments that had shaped my father's life. These waters held his story, our family's story, and they deserved to be honored. Not used as pawns in a power struggle, the stage was set, the evidence collected, the strategies mapped out. Tonight, one way or another, Vanessa and I would finally have the conversation we should have had 3 years ago, when Dad first fell ill. And this time, I wouldn't back down, wouldn't walk away to keep the peace. Some fights were worth having, especially when they were actually about making peace. The wedding party returned just before sunset, their voices carrying across the resort grounds as they disembarked from the chartered boat. From my villa's terrace, I watched them file onto the dock, sun-kissed and slightly tipsy from a day of island exploration and unlimited cocktails. Vanessa was at the center of the group, her arm linked through James's, laughing at something he said. She seemed relaxed, carefree, as if our morning confrontation had never happened. She had no idea what awaited her. I sent a text message to her phone. Need to speak with you privately. Clifftop Gazebo, 7 p.m. Important regarding what we discussed. This morning. No elaboration, no hint of what I'd discovered. Just enough information to pique her curiosity and concern. I knew she would come, if only to ensure I wasn't planning to disrupt her carefully orchestrated wedding week any further. At 6:45, I made my way to the Clifftop Gazebo, a secluded structure perched on the resort's highest point, offering panoramic views of the Caribbean Sea. The staff had followed my instructions perfectly. A small table set with fine china and crystal, candles flickering in hurricane lanterns, a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. Simple, elegant, intimate. Dad's collection case sat at the center of the table, illuminated by candlelight. I positioned myself facing the entrance, wanting to see Vanessa's expression when she first noticed what awaited her. The printed agreement I had drafted was tucked into a folder beside my place setting, ready to be presented at the right moment. At precisely 7:05, Vanessa was never exactly on time, always deliberately 5 minutes late. I heard footsteps on the stone path leading to the gazebo. She appeared in the entrance, wearing a sleeveless white dress, her hair pulled back in a loose chignon. She looked every inch the bride-to-be, radiant and composed, until her eyes landed on the table. Auntie. The wooden case illuminated by candlelight, her confident stride faltered. Her carefully maintained expression cracked, revealing a flash of shock, then panic, before she could compose herself. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tight. "A conversation long overdue," I replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Please, join me." She remained in the entrance, as if crossing the threshold would somehow validate my actions. "How did you get that?" "It was in a secured locker." "I have my methods," I said simply. "Just as you had yours when you took it from Dad's room 3 years ago." "I didn't take—" "Please don't lie, Vanessa. Not anymore. Not about this." I opened the case, revealing the collection of vials nestled in their velvet compartments. "These waters mean too much for more deception." Something in my tone must have reached her, because after a moment's hesitation, she stepped into the gazebo and took the seat across from me. Her eyes never left the collection case. "You had no right," she said, but the usual force behind her accusations was missing. "Actually, I had every right." I carefully removed the notes from the case's lining and slid them across the table. "Dad intended this collection for both of us, and he specifically asked you to include me in the company leadership." His own words, "Vanessa," in his own handwriting. She glanced at the notes without touching them, her jaw tightening as she recognized our father's script. "Where did you find these?" "In the case." He left his wishes quite clear. He was confused. The second note was written after his stroke, I interrupted. Yes, his handwriting was shakier, but his mind was clear enough to recognize what you were doing and ask you to reconsider. I leaned forward. He knew, Vanessa. He knew you were manipulating him, isolating him, controlling access to him. And he didn't approve. Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger, but beneath it, I caught a glimpse of something else. Guilt, perhaps, or shame. You have no idea what it was like, she said, her voice dropping. After the stroke, seeing him so diminished, so vulnerable, I was trying to protect him, to preserve his legacy. By cutting out half his family, by taking away one of the few things that brought him comfort and connection to his memories? I shook my head. That wasn't protection. That was control. And what would you call buying an entire resort to crash my wedding? Isn't that a rather extreme form of control? She had a point, but I wasn't about to concede it. I call it doing what is necessary to recover something precious that you stole. Something that matters deeply to Dad, and to me. For a long moment, we sat in tense silence, the weight of years of competition and resentment hanging between us. The candles flickered as a breeze came off the ocean, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint sounds of resort guests enjoying their evening finally. Vanessa spoke, her voice quieter than before. What do you want, Olivia? Why this private dinner instead of a public confrontation? That would have been more satisfying, wouldn't it? Exposing me in front of everyone? It was a fair question. The old me, the me from before finding Dad's notes, might have chosen exactly that path. Because Dad doesn't want us divided, I said simply. His note makes that clear. And because there's a better way forward for all of us. I slid the folder, containing my proposed agreement, across the table. A way that honors his wishes and restores balance to our family. Vanessa eyed the folder warily, but made no move to open it. What kind of agreement? Shared leadership of Caldwell Industries. Equal ownership, transparent decision-making, and a commitment to work together on Dad's care. I held her gaze steadily. It's what he wanted, Vanessa, for both his daughters to lead his company together, complementing each other's strengths. And if I refuse? I gestured to my phone on the table. Then, I send my letter to the Caldwell Industries board, attaching copies of Dad's notes and outlining my evidence of your manipulation of a medically vulnerable man to gain control of a company that should have been our shared inheritance. Her expression hardened. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice, I corrected. One that allows you to save face, maintain your position as CEO, and move forward in a way that honors Dad's wishes. The alternative would be much messier, for everyone, especially you. Vanessa reached for the champagne bottle, pouring herself a generous glass without offering me any. She took a long sip, then set it down with deliberate precision. You know, I always envied you, she said, the admission clearly difficult for her. That caught me off guard. You envied me? You were the golden child, the favorite, the one with all the natural gifts. She laughed, a short, humorless sound. Is that how you saw it? I was the one who had to perform constantly, to be perfect, charming, the ideal daughter. You were the one who got to be authentic, to pursue what actually interested you. She traced the rim of her glass with one manicured finger. Dad praised my charm, my people skills, but he respected your mind, your analytical abilities. I heard him on the phone once, telling a colleague that you had the real business talent in the family. I stared at her, trying to reconcile this revelation with my lifetime of feeling second best. If that's true, why work so hard to exclude me? Because I was terrified, she admitted, not meeting my eyes. Terrified that if you came into the company, everyone would see what Dad saw, that you were the one with the real talent, that I was just the pretty face, the schmoozer, while you were the substance. The honesty of her admission stunned me into momentary silence. All these years, I had believed Vanessa saw me as competition to be eliminated. I had never considered that she might actually see me as a threat because she doubted her own value. That's not true, I said finally. You have genuine business talent, Vanessa. Your ability to build relationships, to see the human element in transactions, that's valuable. That's why Dad always envisioned us working together. My analytical skills and your people skills, the perfect combination. She looked at me skeptically, as if searching for the trap in my words. I mean it, I insisted. This agreement isn't about diminishing you. It's about creating the partnership Dad always wanted for his company. For his daughters. Vanessa reached for the folder, finally opening it and scanning the document inside. Her expression remained guarded, but I could see her considering the terms, weighing her options. You've thought of everything, she murmured. That's what I do, I replied with a small smile. The details matter. She closed the folder and looked up at me, her expression unreadable. I need time to think about this. Of course, but I'll need your answer before the wedding. Why the deadline? Because if we can reach an agreement, I'd genuinely like to be present at your wedding as your sister, not as an uninvited resort owner forcing my way in. And because Dad deserves to know his daughters have found a way forward, together. Vanessa's gaze shifted to the collection case, to the small vials that held so many significant moments from our father's life. She reached out tentatively, her fingers hovering over one of them. May I? She asked softly. I nodded, watching as she carefully lifted one of the vials, reading its label in the candlelight. 36 degrees, 75 degrees. 7:15:00, Vanessa's first solo sale. Her eyes filled with unexpected tears. I can't believe he kept this, she whispered. It was just a tiny trip around the harbor, barely counts as sailing at all. It meant something to him, I said gently. Just like all of these waters. They're his connections to the moments that mattered. She replaced the vial with careful precision, then reached for another. 40 degrees, 73 degrees lives, 10:08:02, Olivia's academic championship. I remembered that day. Dad had taken me sailing to celebrate, winning a prestigious math competition. It had been a perfect afternoon on the water, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. He was proud of both of us, I said quietly. In different ways, for different reasons, but equally. Vanessa closed the case gently, her hand lingering on the polished wood. When she looked up, her expression had softened, the defensive edge gone from her features. I'll think about your proposal, she said, rising from her seat. You'll have my answer tomorrow. As she turned to leave, I called after her. Vanessa? She paused, looking back. The resort. I didn't know you were planning to buy it for James. That was a genuine coincidence. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Then why did you buy it? To find Dad's collection, and to make sure I didn't miss your wedding. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Good night, Olivia. After she left, I remained in the gazebo, watching the moon rise over the Caribbean, its light creating a silver path across the dark water. For the first time in years, I felt something shift between Vanessa and me, not resolution yet, but possibility. An opening where before there had only been walls. The public reckoning I had initially imagined, exposing Vanessa's theft in front of everyone at her wedding, would have been satisfying in the moment, but destructive in the long term. This private confrontation, this honest exchange, held the potential for something more meaningful. Reconciliation. As I carefully packed up Dad's collection case, I found myself hoping Vanessa would accept the agreement. Not just for my sake or Dad's, but for hers too. For all of us to finally move beyond the competition that had defined our relationship for too long. Tomorrow would bring her answer. And with it, either a new beginning or a final reckoning. Morning arrived with the particular clarity of Caribbean light, sharp, brilliant, uncompromising. I had slept poorly, my mind replaying the conversation with Vanessa, analyzing her reactions, questioning my approach. Had I pushed too hard? Not hard enough? Would she see the agreement as an olive branch or just another power play? I rose early, completing my usual morning routine with mechanical precision while anxiety churned beneath the surface. Dad's collection sat on my desk, the morning sun highlighting the polished mahogany and brass details. I found myself drawn to it repeatedly, opening the case to examine the vials, to read the labels in Dad's precise handwriting, to connect with the moments he had deemed worthy of preserving. By 9 a.m., I had checked my phone at least a dozen times. No message from Vanessa. By 10 a.m., I had rehearsed multiple scenarios for her response, from gracious acceptance to outright rejection. By 11 a.m., I was pacing my villa's terrace, coffee gone cold in my forgotten mug. Finally, at 11:17, my phone chimed with a text. Poolside cabana, noon. Bring the papers. No greeting, no acknowledgement of our conversation, just a location and time. Classic Vanessa, maintaining control of the narrative until the very end. But she was willing to meet, which meant she had at least considered the agreement. It was something. I spent the next 40 minutes reviewing the document one last time, ensuring every clause was clear, every term precisely articulated. This was likely my only chance to restore balance to our family's company and legacy. I couldn't afford mistakes or ambiguities. At noon sharp, I arrived at the designated cabana, a private oasis tucked slightly away from the main pool area, offering both comfort and discretion. Vanessa was already there, looking immaculate in a white cover-up over a turquoise swimsuit, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes. A glass of something clear with lime, likely sparkling water rather than a cocktail, sat on the small table beside her. She didn't acknowledge my arrival immediately, her attention seemingly fixed on her phone. I recognized the tactic for what it was, establishing dominance through deliberate inattention, but said nothing, taking the seat across from her. After a moment, she set the phone aside and removed her sunglasses, meeting my gaze directly. "I've reviewed your proposal," she said without preamble. "And I have some concerns. Not an outright rejection." "Good. I expected you would," I replied, evenly. "What specifically?" "The joint leadership structure. It's unwieldy. Decisions by committee are inefficient." "It's not a decision by committee," I corrected. "It's shared leadership with clearly defined domains. You, as CEO, handle external relations, client development, and public-facing aspects. Me, as CFO, managing finances, risk assessment, and operational strategy. Major directional shifts would require mutual agreement, but day-to-day operations would remain in your domain." She tapped her manicured nails against the glass table, a subtle sign of her discomfort. "And the board seats? You're asking for significant reorganization." "I'm asking for equal representation. 3 board members aligned with you, 3 with me, and 3 independents mutually agreed upon." I leaned forward slightly. "It's a balanced approach that protects both our interests while ensuring the company can't be deadlocked by our disagreements." Vanessa reached for her water, taking a measured sip. "You've clearly given this substantial thought." "I have. And the alternative? If I refuse?" "We covered that last night," I said calmly. "I release my evidence to the board, potentially triggering investigations into your management of Dad's care and assets during his medical vulnerability. That path would be messy, public, and damaging to everyone involved, especially you and the company itself." She set down her glass with careful precision. "You realize that even with this agreement, we would still need to work together, to interact regularly, make decisions jointly, present a united front to the board and employees. After everything, between us, do you genuinely believe that's possible?" It was a fair question, one I had wrestled with while drafting the agreement. Could we actually overcome decades of competition and resentment to work productively together? I think it's possible, I said finally. Difficult, yes. Uncomfortable at times, certainly. But it's possible. I gestured toward the resort grounds around us. Look what we've already managed in just a few days. Honest conversation. Difficult. Truths acknowledged. A path forward is proposed. Under duress, she pointed out. Because you forced the issue by buying my wedding venue and recovering Dad's collection. True, I conceded. But sometimes pressure is necessary to create change. And regardless of what forced us into this conversation, the fact remains that we're having it. That we're talking about real solutions rather than continuing to avoid each other. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she reached into her bag and produced a folder, identical to the one I had given her last night, but with visible annotations and sticky notes marking various pages. I've made some revisions, she said, sliding it across the table. Not to the equity split or the basic leadership structure, but to the implementation timeline and reporting relationships. If we're going to do this, it needs to be workable in practice, not just theory. I opened the folder, surprised and impressed by the thoroughness of her revisions. She hadn't simply rejected or accepted my terms. She had engaged with them, improved them, adapted them to work within the existing corporate structure. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful leadership Dad had always believed she was capable of. These are very good, I admitted, reviewing her notes. The phased implementation makes sense, and I agree that keeping the current departmental structure with dual reporting lines is cleaner than reorganizing everything at once. A flash of satisfaction crossed her face at my acknowledgement. Unlike you, I've been running the company for 3 years. I know what works operationally and what doesn't. And unlike you, I've been working in investment management at a competitor, learning best practices that could benefit Caldwell Industries. I closed the folder. Which is exactly why Dad wanted us working together. Different experiences, different perspectives, complementary strengths. Vanessa reached for her phone, checking the time. I have the rehearsal dinner planning meeting. In 30 minutes. And I need time to review your revisions in detail, I said, understanding the implied dismissal. When do you want to finalize this? Tomorrow morning, she decided. 9 a.m. We'll sign the papers, then I'll call the board chair to inform him of the changes. She put her sunglasses back on, once again obscuring her eyes. And I'll expect the collection to be returned to Dad's room immediately after the wedding. Of course, I agreed. That was always the plan. She nodded, seemingly satisfied, then added almost as an afterthought. The bridesmaids' brunch is at 11. You should join us. The invitation caught me completely off guard. Are you sure? I'm not exactly at the wedding party. You're my sister, she said with a small shrug, as if that explained everything. And if we're going to be business partners, we might as well start acting like family again. Before I could respond to this unexpected overture, her phone chimed. With a text message, she glanced at it and stood, gathering her things. That's the wedding planner. I need to go. I remained seated, processing what had just happened. Vanessa was accepting the agreement, with modifications but without fundamental resistance. More surprisingly, she was inviting me into her wedding festivities, not as the resort owner who had forced her way in, but as family. Vanessa, I called as she was about to leave the cabana. Does this mean I'm officially invited to your wedding now? She paused, a small smile playing on her lips. Well, since you own the resort, I can hardly throw you out, can I? The quip had no real bite to it, almost sounding teasing rather than bitter. But yes, you're invited, as my sister. She hesitated, then added, I've already asked the planner to add a place for you at the family table. After she left, I remained in the cabana, momentarily overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. I had come to the resort prepared for conflict, for resistance, for a battle of wills that would likely damage our relationship beyond repair. Instead, We were cautiously moving toward reconciliation. Not perfect, not without complications, but real nonetheless. I pulled out my phone to text Rebecca an update. Agreement accepted with revisions. Signing tomorrow. Also, I was officially invited to the wedding. Her response came quickly. Congratulations, though I'm not sure whether to be more impressed that you secured joint leadership of a multi-million-dollar company or that you got invited to a wedding you crashed by buying the venue. I smiled at her comment, then sobered as I considered the reality of what lay ahead. The agreement was just the beginning. Making it work, truly work, not just on paper, would require consistent effort from both Vanessa and me. Overcoming decades of competition and resentment wouldn't happen overnight, but for the first time in years, it felt possible. The wall between us had cracked, allowing glimpses of the sisters we could be to each other without our father's manipulation or our own insecurities driving us apart. As I left the cabana, I noticed James sitting alone at the beach bar, nursing what appeared to be a beer despite the early hour. On impulse, I changed direction and approached him. He looked up as I neared, his expression guarded but not hostile. "Olivia," he acknowledged, "enjoying your resort?" "More than I expected to," I admitted, taking the seat beside him. "May I join you?" He gestured to the empty chair, a tacit welcome. "Vanessa told me about your conversation last night, and your agreement." "Did she tell you everything? About Dad's collection? About the company?" He nodded, taking a sip of his beer. "It's a lot to process, especially 2 days before our wedding." "I'm sorry for the timing," I said, meaning it. "That wasn't intentional." James studied me for a moment. "You know, when I first met Vanessa, she rarely mentioned having a sister. When she did, it was always brief, dismissive. It took me months to realize there was something significant there, not just typical sibling rivalry, but something deeper." I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I simply waited for him to continue. "This morning was the first time she's ever talked about you as a person, not just as a problem or a competitor. The first time I've heard her acknowledge your intelligence, your abilities." He finished his beer and signaled for another. "Whatever you said to her last night, it changed something." The bartender delivered his fresh beer, and James took a thoughtful sip before continuing. "She also mentioned you'd be joining us at the wedding, as a family, not just as the resort owner who strong-armed an invitation." "That surprised me too," I admitted. He smiled slightly. "Vanessa doesn't do anything halfway. If she's decided to reconcile with you, she'll commit to it completely." His expression grew more serious. "Just like if she'd decided to fight you, she would have done that, with equal intensity." "I know," I said, thinking of all the times I'd been on the receiving end of Vanessa's full-focused opposition. "It's what makes her both impressive and exhausting." James laughed at that, a genuine sound that suggested he understood exactly what I meant. "Welcome to the family table, Olivia. I think my wedding just got a lot more interesting than I expected." As we clinked glasses in a tentative toast, his beer to my hastily ordered sparkling water, I felt another piece of tension release. James wasn't just being polite, he seemed genuinely pleased that Vanessa and I were moving toward reconciliation. His acceptance mattered, given the role he would play in our family going forward. The immediate aftermath of last night's confrontation was nothing like I had anticipated. Instead of escalation or defiance, Vanessa had responded with reluctant but genuine engagement. Instead of rejecting my terms outright, she had improved upon them. And instead of continuing to exclude me from her wedding, she had opened the door to my participation as a family. It wasn't a fairy tale resolution. Too much had happened between us for that. But it was a beginning. A tentative step toward healing what had been broken for far too long. Tomorrow we would sign the agreement, making official what should have been the case all along, that Caldwell Industries would be led by both Caldwell daughters, working together as our father had always intended. And then, in 2 days' time, I would attend my sister's wedding. Not as an uninvited observer or a resort owner asserting my rights, but as family. It wasn't the revenge I had initially imagined when planning to buy the resort, but somehow it felt like a far more satisfying victory. The bridesmaids' brunch was held on the beachfront terrace, under a canopy of white silk that billowed gently in the ocean breeze. Round tables adorned with tropical centerpieces dotted the space, each set with fine china and crystal mimosa flutes. A string quartet played softly in the background, their elegant notes mingling with the sound of waves. I arrived at precisely 11, dressed in a pale blue sundress I had hastily purchased from the resort boutique, the closest thing to bridal party appropriate I could find on short notice. As the hostess led me to the table, I felt the curious gazes of Vanessa's friends, most of whom I hadn't seen in years. Vanessa was already seated at the center table, radiant in white linen, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo. She was midway, through a story, her hands gesturing animatedly, her audience of bridesmaids captivated. When she saw me approach, she paused briefly, then continued with barely a hitch, seamlessly finishing her anecdote as I took the empty seat beside Meredith. "Olivia," Meredith whispered, leaning toward me. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us." "Last-minute invitation," I replied, keeping my voice low. "Vanessa's idea." Meredith looked surprised but said nothing more as a server appeared to fill my mimosa glass. Around the table, the conversation continued, focused on wedding details, and shared memories of Vanessa's relationship with James. I remained quiet, observing the dynamics, noting how effortlessly Vanessa commanded attention, a skill she had possessed since childhood. After the appetizers were served, Vanessa stood, raising her glass in a toast. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate with James and me. Each of you represents a significant chapter in my life, and I'm grateful to have you by my side for this new beginning." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room before landing deliberately on me. Including my sister Olivia, who went to extraordinary lengths to be present for my special day. A ripple of knowing chuckles spread through the group. Clearly, the story of my resort purchase had made the rounds. I maintained a composed smile, waiting to see where Vanessa was going with this unexpected acknowledgement. "Many of you have asked about my sister's dramatic entrance into our wedding week," she continued, her tone light, but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. And while I could spin this as just another chapter in our competitive relationship, the truth is more complicated. The room had gone completely silent, all eyes shifting between Vanessa and me. This wasn't the scripted, superficial toast I had expected. This was something else entirely. "The truth is," Vanessa said, her voice softening slightly, "I deliberately excluded Olivia from my wedding. I told myself it was to avoid family drama, to keep the focus on celebration rather than our complicated history. I even told James that Olivia couldn't attend because of work commitments in Singapore." Meredith shifted uncomfortably beside me. Several bridesmaids exchanged startled glances. "But the real reason," Vanessa continued, meeting my gaze directly, now, was fear. Fear that my brilliant, capable sister would somehow overshadow me, even at my own wedding. Fear that the people I care about would see me through her eyes and find me wanting. Fear that the carefully constructed image I've maintained would crumble in her presence. I sat frozen, utterly unprepared for this public confession. This wasn't the Vanessa I knew, the master of deflection, the expert at reframing narratives to her advantage. This was something raw, something real. So when Olivia discovered my deception and responded in her characteristically dramatic fashion, a small smile played at Vanessa's lips, softening the words. By literally buying the entire resort where my wedding was taking place, I was furious, but I was also grudgingly impressed. It was exactly the kind of grand gesture I might have made in her position. She raised her glass higher. To my sister, Olivia, who reminds me that even the most carefully laid plans can be disrupted by someone with enough determination and financial resources. Laughter rippled through the gathering, breaking the tension. I raised my own glass in acknowledgement, unsure how to respond to this unexpected moment of vulnerability from my sister. As the toast concluded and conversation resumed, Vanessa caught my eye across the table, a silent message passing between us. Ball in your court. The brunch proceeded with surprising smoothness. Several of Vanessa's friends made tentative overtures toward me, asking about my life in New York, my work in finance. I answered politely but remained guarded, still processing Vanessa's public acknowledgement of her deception. As the event wound down, Vanessa appeared at my side. "Walk with me," she said quietly. Not a request, but not quite a command either. We strolled along the beach in silence for several minutes, the warm sand shifting beneath our feet, the midday sun creating diamonds on the water's surface. Finally, Vanessa spoke. "I meant what I said back there, about being afraid of having you at the wedding." "I know," I replied. "That's why it surprised me. I thought I should get ahead of the narrative," she said with a small shrug, "before someone else pieced together the truth. You're not the only one who can make strategic moves." I smiled despite myself. Even in vulnerability, Vanessa was calculating her advantage. "The agreement," she said, stopping to face me directly. "I've made my final revisions. My assistant is preparing clean copies for signature tomorrow morning." "You're really going through with it?" "I am," she confirmed, with one additional condition that wasn't in the document. I raised an eyebrow, wary. "Which is?" "That we talk to Dad together, in person. No intermediaries, no filtered messages. Both of us, explaining our new arrangement, showing him we've found a way forward. Together." It was a reasonable request, but also a challenging one. We hadn't been in the same room with our father since before his stroke. The prospect was intimidating, to say the least. "When?" I asked. "After the honeymoon. First week of June." She looked, out over the ocean, her expression softening. "He should see the collection returned in person, by both of us." "Agreed," I said after a moment's consideration. "But I have a condition of my own." "Of course you do," she said, a hint of the old sharpness returning to her tone. "What is it?" "That we find a way to work together that isn't just about competition or power, that we actually try to build the kind of partnership Dad envisioned." I met her gaze steadily. "I don't expect us to suddenly become best friends, but I do expect genuine collaboration." Vanessa studied me, seeming to weigh my words against some internal calculation. "That's going to take work. Years of habits don't change overnight. No, I acknowledged. But if we're both committed to trying, it's possible. I believe that." "The eternal optimist," she said, but without her usual mockery. "Fine. I agree with your condition." We resumed walking, both lost in our own thoughts. The conversation at the gazebo and her public acknowledgement at the brunch had shifted something fundamental between us, though the new equilibrium remained tenuous, unexplored. "There's something else you should know," Vanessa said as we neared the end of the beach. "Something about Dad." My heart tightened with immediate concern. "Is he all right?" "Has his condition—" "He's stable," she assured me quickly. "But about a month ago, he had a moment of unusual clarity, during one of those windows when the cognitive fog lifts temporarily." I nodded, familiar with these episodes from the neurologists' reports. Brief periods when stroke patients experience improved cognitive function, like windows opening in an otherwise clouded mind. "He asked for you," Vanessa said quietly. "Specifically, he wanted to know why you hadn't been visiting. Said he had something important to tell you." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. And you didn't think to call me? To let me know? I told him you were traveling for work, that you'd visit when you returned. Her gaze remained fixed on the horizon. By the next day, he was back in the fog again. Didn't remember asking for you. I stopped walking, anger rising swiftly and hot. You had no right to keep that from me. No right at all. I know, she said, surprising me again with her candor. It's one of many things I need to make right. She finally turned to face me. That's why I agreed to your terms so readily. Not just because you had leverage with the collection and the evidence, but because I knew I had been wrong about a lot of things. I searched her face for signs of manipulation, for the calculated charm she had always wielded so effectively, but all I saw was exhaustion and something that looked remarkably like regret. Why tell me now? I asked, my anger tempered but not extinguished. Because if we're starting over, really starting over, there can't be secrets. Not about Dad. Not about the company. Not about anything that impacts both of us. She ran a hand through her hair, a rare gesture of discomposure. I'm not saying I'll suddenly become an open book, but on the things that matter, that affect our family and our shared future, no more one-sided decisions. It was perhaps the most genuine thing Vanessa had ever said to me, a promise I had never expected her to make, let alone keep. Yet something in her demeanor suggested she meant it, at least in this moment, standing on a Caribbean beach 2 days before her wedding. Okay, I said finally. No more secrets about the things that matter. As we turned back toward the resort, walking side by side in the afternoon sun, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger at the revelation about Dad, relief at the progress toward reconciliation, skepticism about whether this new dynamic could last, hope that maybe, just maybe, it could. The direct confrontation I had anticipated, the showdown over the collection, the company, the years of resentment, had transformed into something more complex and nuanced, not a battle with a clear winner and loser, but a negotiation toward mutual understanding. It wasn't a resolution, not yet, but it was progress, and, for now, that was enough. Vanessa's wedding day dawned with perfect Caribbean clarity. As I stood on my villa's terrace watching staff arrange chairs on the beach, I marveled at how dramatically my intentions had shifted in just a few days. I'd arrived determined to expose Vanessa's deception. Now I was genuinely looking forward to celebrating her marriage, as family, not an uninvited interloper. My phone chimed with a text from Rebecca. Signed agreement received. Filed with our attorneys. Congratulations, co-CFO. I smiled, remembering yesterday's signing. After 3 years of exclusion, I was officially returning to Caldwell Industries as Vanessa's equal partner. No fanfare, just signatures and a brief, not acknowledging the momentous shift in our relationship. That morning, I video-called Dad at his care facility, surprised when they connected me immediately. His right side still showed the effects of his stroke, but his eyes were clear, a good cognitive day. "Where are you?" he asked after dismissing my inquiries about his health. Cayman Islands, for Vanessa's wedding. I wasn't originally invited, but that changed. His eyes flashed with familiar sharpness. "What did you do?" "I bought the resort where she's having the wedding." He burst into raspy laughter, a sound I hadn't heard in years. "That's my girl, always finding the leverage point." Then, abruptly, serious. "Found the water collection yet?" The question stopped me cold. "You know about that?" "Course I know. It's mine. And Vanessa took it." He tapped his temple. "Mine's foggy, not gone." "I found it," I confirmed. "We're bringing it back to you after the honeymoon." Dad leaned closer to the screen. "That day in the hospital, when I signed the papers, I wasn't as confused as Vanessa thought. Knew what I was doing." "What do you mean?" "I signed because I knew she'd mess up eventually. Knew you'd fight back when it mattered. He paused, struggling for words. Family business needs both of you. Different strengths, complementary. Wanted you to figure that out yourselves. Revelation stunned me. Dad was suggesting he had deliberately triggered this conflict, anticipating it would eventually force reconciliation between his daughters. It seemed manipulative, unnecessarily complicated, and exactly the kind of strategic thinking Richard Caldwell was known for. Before I could respond, a nurse appeared, ending our call. Dad's final words lingered. "Tell Vanessa I'm proud, of both, of you." At 11, I joined Vanessa in her suite, transformed into a bridal preparation headquarters with gowns, makeup stations, and champagne. She acknowledged my arrival with characteristic directness. "You're late." "By 3 minutes," I countered. Practically early for Caldwell. As stylists approached to assess my hair and makeup, I admitted, "I didn't bring anything appropriate. For a wedding." "Taken care of," Vanessa replied. "Dresses in the second bedroom. Same blue as the bridesmaids, different style." "You bought me a dress? When?" "Yesterday afternoon. Had it rushed from the mainland?" She met my eyes in the mirror. "I couldn't have you showing up in whatever resort boutique clearance item you found. There will be photographs." The familiar critique made me smile rather than bristle. Some aspects of our relationship might evolve, but Vanessa's fashion perfectionism was clearly immutable. For the next 2 hours, we existed in a strange bubble of feminine ritual, styling, makeup, champagne, wedding details. To my surprise, I enjoyed the camaraderie. The bridesmaids, following Vanessa's lead, treated me with friendly inclusion. Old friends reconnected, inside jokes explained, memories shared. As we waited for the signal to proceed to the ceremony, I mentioned my call with Dad. He remembered it was your wedding day, said to tell you he's proud of both of us. Something flickered in Vanessa's eyes. Hope, perhaps. I'd like to think so. The wedding planner appeared, signaling it was time. As the room emptied, Vanessa turned to me with unexpected vulnerability. "Will you walk with me? To the ceremony site. Not down the aisle, but until then." "Are you sure?" She nodded, emotion briefly cracking her composed facade. "I'm sure." As we walked through the resort toward the beach, Vanessa spoke softly. "I never thanked you for finding Dad's collection, for forcing me to confront what I'd been doing, to you, to him, to myself." She turned to face me fully. I was so focused on protecting what I thought I deserved that I couldn't see what I was destroying. It was perhaps the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I felt something shift between us, some ancient knot of resentment loosening slightly. "We both made mistakes," I acknowledged. "But we're finding a better way forward." She smiled genuinely. "Speaking of forward, I have a wedding present for you. I'm transferring ownership of the resort to James and me, at the price you paid, plus a reasonable return." I stared at her, surprised. "But I thought that you would keep it? Become a resort mogul?" She laughed softly. "Olivia, you belong in finance, not hospitality. Besides, this place means something to James and me now." Before I could respond, the wedding planner appeared, signaling it was Vanessa's time. With a quick squeeze of my hand, she disappeared around the corner to where the wedding party waited. The ceremony was breathtaking. Vanessa radiant in white silk, the setting sun casting everything in gold, vows exchanged against the backdrop of gentle waves. As they sealed their union with a kiss, I found myself unexpectedly emotional, not just for Vanessa's marriage, but for everything this week had represented: confrontation, revelation, and finally, reconciliation. During the reception, Vanessa clinked her glass to address the guests. After thanking everyone, she turned toward my table. "I especially want to thank my sister Olivia, whose determination to be part of this day led to some unconventional wedding planning." Laughter rippled through the gathering. "But who's Presence has made this celebration complete in ways I didn't expect. She raised her glass. To sisters who challenge us to be better, and to new beginnings. To new beginnings, the guests echoed. As our eyes met across the reception, something passed between us. Not quite forgiveness yet, but understanding. Acknowledgement of our shared past and the possibility of a different future. I had come seeking revenge for a deliberate exclusion. I had bought a resort, crashed a wedding, recovered a stolen treasure, all pursuing justice or recognition. What I found instead was something far more valuable. The chance to rebuild a relationship I thought irreparably damaged. The opportunity to create the partnership our father had always envisioned. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Implementing our agreement, restructuring the company, learning to work together without falling into old patterns. It wouldn't be easy. Decades of competition couldn't vanish overnight, but for the first time, I believed it was possible. That Vanessa and I could be more than rivals, more than reluctant partners. That we could be sisters in the truest sense. Different but connected. Competitive but supportive. Later, I slipped away briefly to the beach, standing at the water's edge, watching moonlight create a silver path across the dark sea. I made a silent promise. To honor the journey that had brought me here without being bound by its difficult chapters. To move forward with purpose. To build something meaningful from the broken pieces of the past. Then I returned to the celebration, ready to embrace whatever came next. Not as the sister who bought a resort out of spite, but as a woman who had finally found her way home. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.